Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
It's all for the
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, it is 4:31. We will get started. Welcome to our work session. Today is Tuesday, February 28th, the last day of February. Here comes March. It's flying already. So if you don't mind, Mr. City Manager, we'll start with a meeting follow-up, if you would.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. I really don't
Hang
have
on 1
anything-
minute, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Mike and Kyle cannot hear.
Oh, they can't hear.
No. Oh, they can't hear each other, apparently. Can you hear me, Kyle?
Oh, great.
Kyle, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. You guys have each other as well?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. City Manager, meeting.
No problem. No problem. I really don't have anything for this part of the agenda.
Okay,
Actually.
very good. Anybody else have anything for from last week's meeting? No? Okay, very good. Let's move on to our Health Department update, if we could, please. Mr. City Manager.
Absolutely. We have Ms. Kinder here with us tonight who would like some opportunities to visit with the council on occasion, and tonight would be one of those nights. And so if you don't mind my deferring to her, Mr. Mayor, we can go in that direction.
If you would, please. Yes, ma'am.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, and other councilors for allowing me to come. Welcome to the new people. I haven't had the opportunity to come and talk to you yet, but thank you for allowing me the time to provide just a basic update of what's going on at the health department, as well as some other things. As Mr. City Manager said, my name is Anna Kinder. I'm the Executive Director of the Health Department. I started my position in July of 2019 and worked for the department and in the public health realm for the 19 years prior to that. Christy Nelson is joining me today, who is the Chair of the Board of Health, so she's here to support and answer any questions if you have. Thank you for your recent work to secure the building site for the new health department. Currently, we have $23 million designated for this project for a building of 35,000 square feet. We have 9 departments in our agency, 32 different budgets, 37 staff, and we get funding from the City of Mills and Casper County, Wyoming Department of Health, grant revenue, grant generated revenue. We bill insurance, 1% funds, and other funds, including mini grants and other state programs. I would like to invite any of you to come and visit us, tour the facility, go out on visits, or spend time in our clinic, or even go to events that we coordinate at any point in time. Just let me know. I'm happy to coordinate that. We're charged with prevention, surveillance, looking for trends, watching population health, and providing services to keep people healthy and safe. I have copies of a brief synopsis of all programs if you're interested. I think they would have went out in a board packet a while ago, just kind of giving you that really quick and dirty discussion of each program, what we have for staffing in those, or I have hard copies if you like, or can email those to you if you're interested. We're currently working on updating our personnel handbook, standard operating procedures, job descriptions, onboarding, and performance evals. Some of those things that should have probably transpired when I first started, but there was something else that transpired instead. Some highlights to date from fiscal year 22, because that is the documentation that we have currently, is we did 8,754 insurance claims, 1,015 LT101s, which helps qualify people for Medicare to stay in their home or go into nursing home placement. 651 family planning visits, 876 sexual health visits, 15,793 vaccinations, COVID, flu, school age, adult required. We did 28,245 COVID tests. We are now currently the last freestanding testing site for those in the state that would like to pursue that. We also work very intently with our pediatricians. Environmental health, we did 82 child care inspections, 1,070 food inspections, and 1,559 septics. Communicable disease has distributed 115,000 condoms. We have 912 class participants. Our maternal child health sees 2,361 visits and 76 clients for special health. Prevention, 8,045 prevention materials were distributed throughout the community. And cancer navigation, we assisted 64 individuals and 718 outreach patients or clients. What's to come, just some of the highlights, and then I'll go into more depth on some other things, is this fiscal year currently we've added a Heart Smart program, which addresses teaching and supporting people to do self-monitoring blood pressure checks, especially those that have had a recent cardiac illness or on medication. Healthy You, which is a program that talks about how to talk to your doctor, healthy choices for those that have a chronic health condition. We do PrEP for clients to prevent the transmission of HIV, and we've also added a lead program through the state. The state has now received funding to start enhancing their lead program, so we often get reportable cases of children who test positive or have a certain level of lead in their system. We're actually starting to identify certain areas in the community that could have a higher indication that something's going on there. We met with GIS today because they provided the map that shows like buildings that were built before 1986, those after 1986, then water systems, whether they're what we know they are or the ones that we don't know. So then we looked at those specific areas to see if that's like an indicator. So then we'll overlay where we do have cases of children that have been reported with elevated lead. We completed our standard strategic planning with the MAP training through our national association. We're in the initial phases of doing that. We attended the Health and Wellness Fair. Wastewater analysis is another thing that's coming. Our state has received funding from CDC to actually look at our wastewater to identify if we have certain illnesses that are prevalent in our community or things that we could do to prevent transmission spread. We're starting to see a shift in healthcare. One healthcare concern comes with Dr. Dow, who's been talking about the increase in the number of people who are coming into his office with complications due to diabetes. The age range is 18 to the elderly, accessing their supplies, medications, providers, and community no longer has an endocrinologist. The providers at RMID have had very preliminary discussions to see if they need to expand their scope of practice to actually start providing some diabetic care because the need is increasing. Secondly, we're fielding more and more calls with people who can't find primary care or don't know where to turn with healthcare. Some EMS systems are being contacted for bandage changes or routine health issues because people don't know who to go to. Primary care is out of our scope, and we don't want to go into that realm just because we don't have the capabilities to do that or the funding. We also have had a significant decrease in pediatricians with minimal providers who will take Medicaid. What I'm trying to figure out is how and who to ask for assistance in funding or other ideas for a health navigator that would be housed at the health department as a possible solution. Pursuing funding from the possibility of the Collective Health Trust, other grant opportunities, or requesting additional funds from cities and county to connect people to the correct resources. We recognize it will be like drinking out of a fire hose, that it will be great because there's a lot of people that have no idea how to navigate the system or have lost their way to do that with the changes in healthcare. We would connect them with the health navigator would connect them with UW Family Practice, Community Health Center, Healthcare for the Homeless, or other providers in the community, identify how to get supplies, connecting them with home health, etc. I've also made the Collective Health Trust aware of the shortage of providers as well. As a result of one of the programs that we're involved with, the Behavioral Intercept Model, which is a community-wide effort working on crisis intervention and shortages of mental health and substance use and treatment options. One thing that has come out of that meeting is we've been having very preliminary discussions with Casper Fire EMS about community paramedicine, and that there's actually, the research that I've done is there's actually a billing code and a reimbursement rate of $44.36 through Medicaid. We're going to be working to be a training site for the community health workers for a program out of the University of Wyoming. Unfortunately, these solutions are a couple of years out with a lot of logistics to figure out in between, like who and how and where. We're in the process of our emergency preparedness program to help locate those with access and functional needs. We're able to collect Medicare information, but that leaves out a huge chunk of the population. For those that we identify who require assistance getting out of their house in a disaster, whether man-made or natural, those are medically dependent, taking into consideration extended power outages, which we recently experienced, sheltering in place, warming shelter locations, water issues, etc. So we'll be sending out to all of the area residents a postcard that will allow people to contact us and capture data from them to be identified and put into GIS mapping to assist our first responders. So those that are not accessing true medical systems that we know now, but identifying those that wouldn't be able to leave their home if they needed to. Those are unsure who know what shelter in place means and those kinds of things. I did bring along with us ghost aid kits for individuals or family and our emergency preparedness booklet if you're interested. Those are locations that you can put information like your medications, your providers, your children, all of those kinds of things into one place, recognizing that you need to consider packing for your pet if you're taking your pet somewhere. Those areas, just giving suggestions to help you prepared. So in regards to funding, I've been working on a market study for all of our staff. The majority of our staff are under minimum compensation. That would make a difference in our ability to keep and secure staffing. There have been 25 people who have left their position in the last year. Some staff have been having to pick up extra duties to fill obligations, and we've not pursued some ground opportunities which would allow us to expand community programs. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. We've made modifications due to our inability to get staff, and we've limited some services and modified job duties. For example, instead of hiring a nurse, which are really hard to find, we are now operating with a medical assistant, which is the first time the health department has done that. Some positions have changed up to 3 times in this time frame, primarily in nursing and in clerical. And in fact, some of them are going across the street to the state health building because they're able to pay a higher rate than we are, or to, obviously, Wyoming Medical Center. Less than 1/4 of the staff have had longevity of 3 years or more. We're expecting increases in our medical supplies. Last year we spent $38,000 in medical supplies that we require. To date, we're already at $42,000. So if we continue on our trend, we'll be at $64,000. Vaccines continue to elevate. Shingles, chickenpox, TB, yellow fever, and rabies continue to increase. And then all types of birth controls are significantly going up as well. Last year, we spent $21,000, and we're on track to spend up to $29,000. Lab testing has also gone up. So we're trying to make and be prepared for all of those kinds of things. And then lastly, we'll have 2 board vacancies at the end of this fiscal year. One is a city-appointed person and one is a county. One of those has to be a medical physician to be in that role. So I look forward to the opportunity to present any additional information, answer questions, provide you with our annual report, the full report from fiscal year 22, and discussion of fiscal year 24 in the future. And just to summarize, we're limited in our expansion, the ability to get some of the new grant opportunities that are out there, the lack of workforce that includes our losses and the state to the state and Wyoming Medical Center. We've also recognized the increased cost of all of our supplies, mostly medical. I'm concerned about the future and ongoing turnover. I'm proud of my staff for their resilience and hard work, balancing multiple positions and the dedication to serving the community. We did an adaptive leadership training, which was through part of the strategic planning that is through our National Association of County and City Health Officials. There were 7 community partners, 1 city partner, 7 county participants, and 6 health department staff that were charged to have conversations on how to recruit and keep motivated motivated workforce. And this is an ongoing project and not one with super easy answers. So that is what I have for you. If you have questions that you would like to ask, I tried to be as quick and succinct as I possibly could.
Who's our current liaison to the health board?
Randy.
Randy is, okay. Anybody have any questions?
No question for Carter, I think.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. And, it sounds like there's similar to the issue that we've experienced in the city. writing grants takes a lot of time. We don't necessarily have the bandwidth to apply for them, so we are leaving money on the table. Do we have capacity to include the health department in with sustainable strategies or any of the other, broader efforts to pursue grants that our entity and other entities are pursuing?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I think from a sustainable strategy standpoint, there could be some opportunities there. The challenge that comes is, unfortunately, that's not necessarily a plug and play.
We don't write them.
Exactly. We still have some authorship at stake and that sort of thing. But that's not to say, though, that they couldn't help.
Mayor.
Eric, please.
So in my previous role, I worked and represented the health department. And we did work with Ashley Padish quite extensively on both the earmark and the ARPA funding that the county received for the health department. And so I think Anna has some experience working with them. They are very good, very helpful, I think, and I don't want to speak for her. I think where the rubber hits the road is once you get the grant, you have to have the staff to actually implement and report back. I think that's the problem.
May I follow up with that?
Of course.
Yes, so a lot of it is the staff to do it afterwards. We also have the opportunity through the Collective Health Trust. We're in a pilot study where we are able to access grant writers through them, where we don't have to pay for that, but finding the people to fulfill the jobs has been a significantly huge challenge.
Nationwide.
Nationwide and all disciplines and all.
And just as a comment, I believe we're working on a conglomerate between us and the county with the opioid money we got, and I believe you're privy to that and you are on board with that and willing to kind of help us navigate that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
we
good.
have a meeting on Monday to start the work on that.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for the update. Yes. Okay, Carter, let's move on to the Metro Animal Shelter Generator Project.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the situation that is before us is with respect to trying to maintain a continual power supply as it relates to maintaining the environmental systems for one, as well as, of course, a lot of the other concerns that we have with respect to electrical bumps and so on that occurs in an aging facility. The shelter is in somewhat of a unique position compared to many of our other operations in that it is a separate fund that is supported by partner agencies wherein we have established a little bit of a balance in the fund that the shelter operation is housed in. So our request to you today is whether or not you would have any tolerance at all for a one-time expense as it relates to the purchase of a generator, particularly as we come into the summer season, wherein when we turn on air conditioning and so forth to try to keep the animals cool and whatnot, and the oppressive heat that can occur in that facility, we oftentimes run into power concerns and keeping that continual flow, as I'd mentioned earlier. We think we've got a bead on a path for a generator that would, we could install and be ready for the summer season potentially, if you were willing to do that sort of in an unbudgeted approach here. I do have Lieutenant Tremmel and the Chief with us tonight to go through some of the more finer nuances of this request. But I wanted to give you at least some of the basic concerns that we have, as well as a solution, if you will, to moving forward if council is willing.
Before we refer to them, can you give us an idea? I know the money's coming from the Metro Animal Reserve Fund.
Mm-hmm.
I did read that in the packet, but I'm curious the dollar amount we're talking about before we move forward.
Well, that is something I'd like to be updated by the chief on. I don't have the answer.
Okay, very good. Chief?
I'm also going to call on Jeremy. Mayor, counselors.
Okay.
So the process that we're in right now is we have gone out and gotten bids for it, but that was somewhat premature. The process that we have to follow to adhere to our city purchasing rules is this process where we get approval from you to put this out for RFPs. So we're not going to be able to give you an exact number today. The initial bids that we got were very favorable in our mind. They came back better than we had hoped. But those bids are incomplete. It doesn't include the engineering studies that need to be done. So what we're seeking for today is the approval to get this out to RFP. Ultimately, this comes out of that reserve fund, something that we've already paid into, and that's what it's designed to do. But that's essentially, I can't quote you an exact number today because that's what we're trying to get authorized today.
Understand. Anybody have any questions? I'm assuming this is going to be a go, so
I just have a question real quick.
please.
Depending, I know that the chief and Jeremy can't give us a number. We obviously have enough in our reserve for Metro. I'm getting the shake by Jill.
Jill give you an
She went like this. Carter, she went like
I mean,
this.
honestly, Chief, we're looking,
She went like this, actually.
we're probably looking $50,000, something like, I mean, this isn't like a $250,000 expense we're talking about.
Mayor, it is not going to be $50,000, but it is not going to be $250,000.
Well done.
But whatever it is, Jill seems to think we have the money in reserve funds to be able to take care of it, correct? Okay.
That's all I was just wondering. So.
Is everybody good with sending out the RFP to get a cost on this thing? Very good. That was easy, Chief.
Thank you.
Now, does anybody else have any more questions? Are we good? Steve, did you have a question for him, or?
I was gonna ask, is it gonna be 10,000, 50,000?
Steve, it's gonna be between 50, but it's not gonna be 250.
I heard that, but that was my question gonna be. That was what I was gonna ask.
Sir.
You can't, you cannot hold me to these numbers. I'm going from memory. I want to say that roughly speaking, the generator was going to be, somewhere in that 90,000, a turnkey pad, everything that we need to do. But now we have an engineering study that we did not anticipate. Add another 15 to it.
Sure. Roughly, okay, I got it. Kyle, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. And thanks, Chief, for the information. I don't remember ever hearing about a Metro Reserve Fund, so I was just curious to know a little bit more about it. I assume it's not a large fund, but just kind of curious how revenue is generated for that fund and what it's typically used for. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, the reserve fund, if in prior times it was called the depreciation fund, so essentially the operations up there, they exist with expenses that need to be made. The building has expenses that need and replacement costs, and so the fees that we, the city, pay into, and the other user entities pay those fees with some anticipation that we need to be able to stockpile this money for those eventual replacement costs. And so there's not a large pool of money in there because some of these major repairs that we've had to do to the building in the last few years have come out of that reserve. But this is one of those things that's important enough that we need to move forward to secure that operational efficiency, caring for the health and welfare of the animals. So it's an appropriate use of that reserve fund to purchase this generator as a functional reality of operating that entity.
Go ahead, Kyle,
Follow up,
please.
if I could, thank you.
Sure.
And thank you, Chief. I guess the reason I was asking is because we had allocated $150,000 for the next 1 cent cycle for cat kennels, dog walking path, and I think there was a third thing, something related to the HVAC. And so I was just curious. Again, my assumption was that this fund isn't large because I would assume if it had at least that much that maybe we would have already allocated that money for those purposes. So that was why it was piquing my interest.
So yes, council did authorize out of that 1 cent 17 authorized some monies to help us with these anticipated expenses. But those monies they'll be coming in over the next 4 years. So we haven't accrued and got our hands on that money yet. But that is money that is going to be used for our portions of these expenses. You know, the city of Casper bears the greater percentage because we're the largest user of Metro Animal Services.
Jenna, did you have anything? No? Okay, well, Chief, you got your directions, so I think you are good to go, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeremy, did you have anything?
Kyle, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm just not feeling well and didn't want to come and cough all over you guys.
It looks to me like
Thanks,
you got booted to the garage, so I just wanted to make sure everything was okay on the home front.
This is my office that my wife is slowly taking over for her crafting room.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry to put you on the spot. Okay, let's move on, if we could, to the Casper area transit fleet conversion study update. And this is information only, I believe, Mr. Napier.
Yes, sir, you are correct, Your Honor. This is the opportunity for us to get caught up as it relates to the progress of this particular study. This is one of those that the feds would suggest needs to be done, given our potential for needs along these lines in the future. And so from that standpoint, we've commissioned this study funded through FTA MPO funds, and we are fortunate to be able to spend some time with our consultants in this matter, and Liz and Beth, in terms of any questions that you might have pursuant to the information they deliver tonight.
Ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, as Mr. Napier said, the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, requested a year ago that the city use some of its MPO funds to commission a study, really a feasibility study, to consider the potential for the electrification of our fleet in a phased format. And so we did allocate money through the MPO, which is what their request was, and when our federal fiscal year started October 1st, Beth had put together an RFP. We went out for bid to find out who in the country does electrification feasibility studies. Councilor Pollock was on that selection committee along with our fleet manager, our transit manager, and the MPO team. And so we did select a consultant. We are pleased that they have come to Casper. Over the last 2 days, we have put together an itinerary that included really writing the fleet and getting a feel for the temperatures here at this time of year, looking at the altitudes, the elevations, that our fleet requires on our fixed route. Also, the distances that we travel to serve our 6 fixed routes. We also had meetings aligned with YDOT so that they could understand what YDOT plans for transmission and the electric facilities along the interstate system. They met with our fleet manager and our mechanics today and went out to the actual service garage, looked on site. They had a tour of our bus garage over on 4th Street at the transit office to look at where the fleet is housed. We do not have the fleet, as you all know, housed inside. We require, we have plug-ins for our buses, but we can only house a few inside the bus garage. And then most recently, we also met this afternoon with Rocky Mountain Power. Mike Morrissey, who you all previously heard from, had a chance with his engineer to kind of talk through what grid plans were and what this would, if it was feasible also from an electrification standpoint with the fleet. So tonight, we've got our transit manager, Scott Drescher, with us, as well as our MPO supervisor. Beth is taking lead on this project, and I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce the team and a little bit more about the study, but I'd wanted to bring the new council member team up to speed on where this actual study had arisen from a year ago. Beth?
Mayor, councilors, as Liz said, this study was commissioned through the MPO. For those of you not familiar with this alphabet soup, the Casper Area MPO is basically a coalition of Natrona County, Wyandotte, Bar None, Mills, and Evansville. It's federally mandated. We get together, we do our transportation planning, which does include transit planning. We are 90% federally funded, and the other 10% is through a match through all the entities. Every entity gets to request studies. This one was requested by Casper as part of our unified planning work document. Last year, as Liz said, the FTA strongly encouraged Casper to do this study. They're encouraging everyone nationwide to do the study. Today, we have HDR with us. HDR was selected as the consultant for a variety of reasons. They are performing these studies for other entities, a lot of them similar to Casper. We were just talking about North Dakota, South Dakota, other places similar to Casper today. It's one of the reasons we selected them is we hear everyone say, you can't do that in Casper. Casper's unique. Wyoming's unique. Well, so is North Dakota. So we were highly encouraged by that. So today with us to do a presentation on this study, I'm not going to get too involved in it. I'm going to let them talk about it. We're just going to go over the basic nuts and bolts, what we're looking at with this study. All of these problems that Liz brought up, this is why you guys requested this study, is we can figure this out if and when it makes sense for Casper to transition and what that transition may look at. So with us today, we have Tyler Hopkins and Rob Mowat with HDR, and I'm going to turn it over to Tyler and Rob.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Mayor, councilors, thank you for the time tonight. Appreciate it. Going forward, so I'm working with HDR. I lead the actually zero emissions efforts globally for HDR. I'm also an avid fly fisherman. I've come into Casper and fly fishing, so when we assign staff, I go, you know what, I'd like to be on that project. So I'm part of the project working there. Tyler, who will go through all the details, is the deputy on the project and doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and we work together on a number of projects all over the country right now going forward through that. Going through that, we'll kind of give you the project purpose of what a little bit of how it got started. We'll put it into context for you because it's not a true fleet transition plan right away. We'll talk about zero emission bus overview of where they are, technology is in the state. We'll talk a little bit about existing conditions, market assessment, community experience, and then we'll close it out as we go through that. We'll take up, I guess, at 30 minutes, we'll take up 20 minutes or so and leave plenty of time for questions and answers as we go through this. Project purpose really was to analyze the Casper fleet. So really looking at a feasibility study. So in a feasibility study for us really looks at, is it operationally feasible based on the requirements of what the service needs to be doing every day? Is it financially viable both in operating capital, CapEx, and operating X? Is it viable by the technology that's available today? Is it viable by the facilities that you have, constraints? Is there enough power available? Is the power consistent and reliable? There's a lot of variables. We'll go into those kinds of things as we go through that. And when we pull all these costs together, these variables together, we do what we call internally kind of a course of actions. We start compiling those lists. Okay, this is the way, if I was the city of Casper, this is what I would spend my money on. This is how I would take care of this. So we kind of put together those actions. Then we'll have a working group with local staff here, MPO, and really kind of pull things together, say, okay, this is the kind of ways, and we kind of massage that together and into an approach as we move forward to go through that. One of the key variables we did that is we really wanted to align the project with the 23 through 25 council goals for livability, sustainability, and citizen engagement. So you can see here the write-up or summarization of the various goals that you have going through there, and the italicized elements there, the implementation solutions, are the action items between that. So we really tried to make sure that our goal and our tasks were meeting these elements so that they're tied into overall goals of the city council as we go forward, moving the project forward. Kind of a little bit of the context for this, as they said before, the FTA is pushing this forward. It is strongly encouraged everywhere nationwide. Started very heavily 3 or 4 years ago with all the big transit systems in the United States, and it's been slowly pushed out into the various organizations. And the FTA's efforts to do this is they want, in this thing you'll see, they want plans. They want to know what a plan is to move forward. So when you start applying for federal funding, and we'll get to that in a second, you actually have to have a plan. You can't just show up and say, I want 4 buses for this. They want to say, what is your plan and how do those 4 buses meet your plan goals, if that makes sense. They want to make sure things are, and there's a lot of alignments to those elements of the plan that go forward to that. the transit industry as a whole is shifting to zero emissions vehicles, whether that be battery electric or hydrogen vehicles. It's a big push. There are many states that are very progressively out there mandating it regulatorily beyond the federal requirements. And then there's other people that are doing it just because it's the community efforts to go through that politically, socially. There's other places that are just saying that's where the funding's going. I need to be lined up for us as we move forward through that. But again, in no way is this project dictating electrical transmission for the service. It's literally saying, this is what's feasible, here's what's moving forward, this is the most logical path for you based upon your existing conditions. And then it'll be brought back to you folks to go to that feasibility. One of the things we keep talking about federal funding, going through that stuff. So you can see here, the key here is the blue bar graph elements. That is the funding for replacement of vehicles for existing. So that's bus replacements and bus facility improvement programs. And then you'll see the green is the low-no grants. So that's low or no emissions vehicles. In that case, they determine low or no emissions by the emission that comes from the tailpipe of the vehicle. They don't go all the way back to point of origin. It's just the emission from the vehicle itself. And you can see the amounts were coming in a little bit, and then there's this huge spike. And you can see this, and then you'll see the blue lines are flat lining out and going down. And their mission to folks is, we want more people in if you want federally funding money for your facilities and your fleets, we expect you to be in low emission or no emission services going forward. So you can see all the tripling of funding here, and then you'll also see the blue line is dropping down. So right now, if you were to go out there, you're competing in this blue line nationally, and then now you'll have this green capacity. You can now start trying to get into this pool if you can afford to that. Just so you can kind of see there, the $1.6 billion was awarded for bus facilities last year. There's 53 projects going forward to $72 billion. 1,800 vehicles, 11,000. So they funded 1,800 vehicles last year. 1,100 of those were zero emission or low emission vehicles. So there's a lot pushing going to there. There's also an important piece here to realize that a requirement of this funding is, if you go after this and go through that for fleet replacements, is 5% of that funding right off the top has to go for workforce development. And the reason for that is they want to make sure that anyone who's currently working in this space, so if you're a 30-year diesel mechanic journeyman, you don't lose your job because all of a sudden electric vehicles are showing up. So it's developing training programs, apprentice programs, outreach to the communities. It's getting folks engaged and moving forward through that. So it's literally, you have to set that up. Interestingly enough, it doesn't pay for training because they don't want it to be a one-time expense. It's for you to set up systems. So it's, what is your system and what's your process to keep this forever perpetuating going forward through that program. So any questions on my stuff so far? I'll turn over to technical stuff for Tyler in a second. So, okay, there you go.
I've been so excited to use the clicker.
It's been a while.
I know, I don't get too many excuses. So I'm going to give a quick overview of zero emission buses in general, just some of the vehicle and charger technology. Then I'll jump into what the fleet here looks like and some of that feasibility stuff. I won't dive into every piece on here, but just to show you what these look like. The zero emission bus, really what you're looking at is that power supply system coming in and charging your battery directly. Whereas, say, for your car battery or for hydrogen, you've got that fuel coming in, you're converting it to energy, and that's what you're using to charge the battery. So this will kind of come back when we talk about how you might have some lower maintenance costs and fuel costs and things like that. They're just a lot less complex. So some of the benefits of zero emission buses, they have zero tailpipe emissions. We can't say zero emissions. You have to manufacture them. You have to get rid of the battery. So we know that they're not zero emission life cycle, but none when you're out there driving. There's nothing coming out of that tailpipe. They have quieter operations. I drive an electric vehicle and it is dead silent. And then potential for lower fuel costs. That's depending on electricity rates versus gasoline costs. You get places like California where there's a huge discrepancy there, and it makes a lot of sense. Electricity is cheap, and we just talked to Rocky Mountain Power today, and it sounds like electricity is relatively cheap here as well. And then the potential for lower maintenance costs. Again, they're less complex, fewer moving parts. The brake pads last longer. There's a lot of benefits there for maintenance. Some of the challenges, though, the vehicles cost more. I think we all know that. For now, we think that they'll start to come down. We think that those, the internal combustion engine, the gas and diesel vehicles, and the electric vehicles are going to kind of even out 2027, 2028, somewhere in that time frame. Part of that is that taxes are increasing on internal combustion engine vehicles. part of that is that the technology is getting more in demand. So your supply is growing and the technology is just getting better and cheaper. Cold weather and terrain impacts, that's something that's really relevant here. And in other studies we've done in Colorado and other mountainous areas and cold areas, they can impact the battery capacity and drop that a bit. The need for significant power upgrades to accommodate chargers, like at the bus garage, and then battery degradation over time. And I'm actually going to show that in just a second. So the battery capacity we talk about, when you look at that nameplate battery capacity that they tell you that vehicle has, say it's 440 kilowatt hours, how we measure that, and say you go about 200 miles. What you're actually going to get in reality is kind of, take 20% of that off. At the end of the day, you don't want to reach zero charge. And to prolong the life of the battery, you don't want to necessarily push it over, say, 85 or 90%. Kind of like your phone, how it starts to trickle charge nowadays when it hits 80% so that it doesn't reduce the lifespan of the battery. Then, over time, you're going to lose more of your battery capacity. It's just going to get weaker over time. So what we showed before was 200 miles of driving range. By the end of that vehicle's life, 10 years down the line, it might be almost cut in half. Charging infrastructure, I think this is the last piece, and then I'll get into the fleet. We've got the slow depot charging, which is you plug in just like you picture any electric vehicle. You're going to plug it in, it's going to be a little bit slower, and you're going to do that probably at the bus garages or places like that. The fast conductive charging, might have seen that, not in town, but maybe some photos like this. We kind of call it wireless charging. You do still have to be connected to that electrical rail, so it's not perfectly wireless. The inductive charging, though, is, can't see it, but there's these blue tiles in the pavement, and so you run a coil underneath there, and the magnetic, I'm so bad at electricity and magnetism. The magnetic, that coil creates that magnetic field that's going to charge the vehicle without any contact at all. So jumping into the actual fleet that you all have today, the fleet has 22 vehicles. They're all gas or diesel powered. They're mostly cutaways. So you can see actually this right here, where you've got kind of the front of the vehicle here, and then you've got the rest attached onto it. The Link service provides fixed route service, and then Assist provides that door-to-door service, kind of paratransit service. The vehicle ages, there's some new vehicles. They also range up to 13 years. The buses hold anywhere between 7 and 30 passengers. The Link buses tend to hold a little more, 16 to 30, and the Assist has a couple minivans and then a few of the regular sized buses. This is going to actually come in on the next couple slides. The daily use here is more than what we've seen in some other agencies. So you're seeing these average daily uses. You're going up to 150 miles, and then in a day you can even go 200 or 205 miles. And so a couple pictures of the site visit that we had. We were at the bus garage right here on the left, and then the city maintenance garage on the right. So we do have a lot of battery electric cutaways available today. Every vehicle that's in the fleet today has an equivalent. That being said, the maximum driving range is around 170 miles. So here's where you start to maybe see some of the problems. You can typically, any of those vehicles can use level 2 chargers, which will get you about 25 miles every hour that you're plugged in, or the DC fast chargers that'll charge up your car or a bus in less than an hour. There aren't any hydrogen fuel cell cutaways, just to mention. That technology is still really only available for really large buses. So, like I said, all the existing fleet vehicles have a market available battery electric equivalent. That being said, the average range that they have might not satisfy those 200-mile service days. We're still working on a detailed energy modeling where we go vehicle by vehicle and we say, all right, this one can go this far, and it needs to go this far, and here's your overrun, and here are some charging strategies to make it through a day. We're still working on that, but we do see that it might require maybe additional vehicles that swap out during the day, or some of those faster chargers to top off in the middle of the day. The last piece here is the community experience that we got invited to have over the last 48 hours. We met with YDOT and Rocky Mountain Power earlier today. YDOT kind of will serve as that pass-through for some of this federal funding. And then Rocky Mountain Power, we wanted to talk about the grid infrastructure that's out there today, and some of just preliminary ideas of what our charging needs might look like in the future. We don't think we'd have a huge power demand, and what we heard from them is that everything we were saying sounded very realistic. That there would be power for it, maybe a new transformer, but the actual power is available to be put there. And the first thing we did yesterday, we took part in some ride-alongs on the buses. We rode on the blue, green, and yellow routes, and we just wanted to kind of see. The blue route has really high ridership. The green route goes up a couple really big hills, and the yellow one goes very far in terms of distance. So we kind of wanted to see all of those kind of unique characteristics that make Casper's transit system. And we also got to talk to some riders yesterday, just about how, sometimes crowded the buses might be, how often they come, just to get an idea of what the community was thinking. So just to sum up, and then we'll go ahead and take questions. Like Rob said, we're aligning with the council goals of livability, sustainability, and citizen engagement. Again, we're not dictating a fleet transition, but we want to support everyone in pursuing that funding and at the bottom, minimizing costs if or when it does become feasible. I think that pretty much sums it up. So, questions?
If I may, in order to get federal funding, you would have to have, your study would have to be, I guess, geared towards that direction, would it not? In order for us to access or apply for that type of federal funding? And if that's true, where are we, I guess?
So the federal funding, if you're going to apply for no emissions funding, so in the low no, you can do low emission or no emissions. If you do a low emissions, you do not need a plan. But if you do no emissions, then you do have to have a plan. And the plan is a staged plan, so that can be over the life of the assets, 10 to 12 years. So it can be 2 buses this year, then 2 buses with nothing, and then somewhere else down the line. And so yes, there will be a staged plan, and what we will produce as an end result is an FTA compliant plan, which will have the workforce development in there, equity in there. It'll have the fleet transition plan, capital costs, engagement of energy providers, all the 6 or 7 things that are required by that in the plan. Once we will do that, we'll develop the plan with your folks to do that, and I'm assuming that would come back for approval by you folks to be your official plan moving forward. We'll have this plan wrapped up by
End of May.
So we're finishing up the data gathering right now.
Well, as a follow-up, the reason I asked the question is just because there's federal funding available doesn't mean we need to go get it.
Correct.
That's why I was curious to find out kind of where your thoughts were, if this is something that's even viable or something we need in our community. So, and I guess that's what the study will eventually come out and say to us, right?
It's 2 answers to that. One of which we will look at it from the technology component of yes, this is viable or not viable, or if it's let's wait or move forward with that. The second will be a decision that you'd have to make based upon whether or not you go after federal funding. You do replace your funding with your vehicles now through your general fund, and you can continue that way. But the vehicles are considerably more expensive, right? So and the infrastructure is considerably more. So if you're going to pursue this down the road, you're more than likely going to need another revenue source to pay for this.
Understood. Steve?
Will you be looking at both the hydrogen and electric, or will you only be looking at electric?
There is no hydrogen option available right now. We've met with the OEMs that are making the cutaway vehicles now, and they're not on the board for the next 4 to 5 years to come out with a hydrogen option in that thing. So we're looking at the electric for now, but we are going to build into our plan a set of parameters for the industry to look for it. So if in 3 or 4 years they show up with one, we'll set up a list of criteria saying, well, when you look at the industry, it should look like this. The vehicle need to have this many kilowatts of power and all those kinds of things. So it'll be so you can use it in the future when they do come available.
Oh, that's what I was curious about, because you had mentioned that this plan would possibly take 10 to 12 years to develop. So therefore, I'm assuming, but that hydrogen vehicles would be potentially coming into play in this size range within that time frame. And so trying to look at a cost comparison and feasibility versus the batteries and the short life and everything else that goes with the electrics.
Counselor and Mayor, so the MPO asked in this study that they look at like a phased approach. What do we look at? as Casper faced it. So the horizon of this would be when it makes sense to start, and do you start at 25, 50%, 75%, 100%, what each phase of that looks like. The MPO did not anticipate that the city would go full blow 100% all out in the beginning. Our anticipation was that this would probably start with a few vehicles, and then as vehicle replacement took place over our normal schedule, what steps would need to be in play to get that replacement schedule. So that's why he's saying over 10 years, and that technology has changed so fast, as we all know, over the last 2 years. What the next 10 is going to look like, we don't know. We don't have a crystal ball, but we did ask for a phase-in plan.
And the other part that hydrogen we'll look at too, we talk about is the cost of hydrogen is more expensive than actually the cost of buying diesel. And so there's a cost of that and availability of that. And so there's some other things in there that we'll look at as well, that we'll put in the performance industry indicators to look at.
Mr. Bond?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if hybrid buses even exist, and if so, would they be a better option for given Casper's climate?
Yes, hybrid cutaways definitely do exist. They would be a vehicle you'd save about 35% on emissions that way. But they do exist, and they would qualify under the low component of the low portion grant.
Yeah, and they do make sense to look at as an option just with if you were to start very soon, the ranges of a full battery electric bus might not actually complete a route today. So it would be a very maybe viable option, something worth looking at.
Yeah, the other valuable thing is they wouldn't require any change to your infrastructure because they're just going to fuel the diesel and if the hybrid takes place. So if that might get you 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, and then you say, oh, here's what hydrogen really looks like. So it's a viable course of action.
Lisa?
Thank you.
In your report, are you guys going to include some of the maintenance and like changes of new batteries and things like that? Because I do know that that's
we'll look at the
costly.
CapEx, we'll look at the operating costs and replacement stuff, maybe your replacement value, and we'll do as a comparison versus what you're currently paying. We did that today with Scott and the city offices. We went through how many gallons are you buying of diesel and gas. So we're all the parts costs, labor costs, the last.
And then how often is the charging stations? So do those have to be upgraded periodically as well?
No, the way we're doing it, they shouldn't need. They should last through, but they'll last. They will need to be replaced at 10 to 12 years. Yeah, and more often what happens is they become outdated, then they lose performance. Meaning their technology it's like it'll be like having an iPhone 10 still working when they're already on iPhone 14. It'll work, but they'll end up being replaced. But they'll last. The chargers will last the life of the vehicle for sure.
Spider-Monkey.
So you're thinking the life of the vehicle is 10 years?
Yeah, there's different standards set by the funding sources on how long you can use based on years and mileage.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you. I do have one question, if I may. Those hybrids, do they charge when they're on like say it switches over to diesel, will it charge that battery while it's running on the diesel part of it, or?
Yeah, it actually runs through battery regeneration and stuff.
I would think so
it really
too.
Picks up the initial acceleration of the vehicle where you use most gas, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So it takes over it functions just like a hybrid car does. So it'll take over the battery pack there, it rejuvenate through that, but it's not like a big generator that feeds
Sure.
batteries.
I understand. Ladies, did we have anything else?
As Liz poking me to remind. So just so you guys know, when we were here and coming to council meeting, we realized that a work session was not a place for the public to come talk, ask questions. So the MPO asked them to stay. So from 6 to 8 tonight in the forum over here at City Hall, inviting the public to come, ask any questions that they had, provide input, look over this presentation, and talk to HDR. We just wanted to be let the public know that we weren't doing this in a way that they couldn't come talk to us or ask questions. So that will be available right after this meeting.
I'd be curious if you get anyone, but I think it's awesome that you provide that opportunity for them. So, okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for, yes, absolutely. Let's move on to council leadership selection process. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is an item that I would consider more of a follow-up item than anything with respect to some of the conversation council had during the last leadership selection process, wherein we certainly heard from a number of folks from the community who were asking how this works, what this is all about, and there were some questions from some of you as well who were new to the process and so on. The request really was whether or not we should give this process a little more evaluation to determine if indeed there were things that council would like to see captured and memorialized in a policy moving from this point forward. At this point in time, the policy is pretty broad, leaves a lot for interpretation, as it were, from sitting members of the council, and oftentimes can be confusing and so on. So our hope is that if indeed council is interested in following a more prescriptive pattern in the future, that direction could be given so that we could capture these items and elements in a policy that we would bring forward at some point in the future, pursuant to whatever it is that you'd like to see brought forward in that way. And so, it could include things like the way that the voting takes place, in air quotes, because of course you don't actually do voting until you get out on the floor, technically. What level of conversation you'd like to see happen in executive session or not. Who it is that you'd like to see tally the votes. What you'd like to see by way of revealing of those votes, if you will, to the public. Because this time around we did get some of those kinds of questions, which doesn't happen every time, by the way. So any of those elements, staff would appreciate understanding, sort of, like I said earlier, a prescriptive direction if council is willing to provide that. And so if it pleases the council, Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to do is defer to our city clerk, who oversees this process very closely, and allow for any questions, directions, whatever it is you'd like to see happen.
Yes, please, Fleur.
Your Honor, councilors. So I'm just here tonight, as City Manager Napier stated, just to go over the process. As you saw in your memo, this is the process we took the last time, and we've kind of changed it and refined it as we've gone on. So it would be nice to have it in some sort of resolution or memorialized so that we can fall back on that and we know consistently what we need to do every year for the straw poll. As far as the vote, we know that we have the statute that provides that in the ordinance that provides we need to do that at the beginning meeting of the year in January. But the straw poll, all of that is just dependent on each council. So at this time, I'm just here to answer questions and take down notes so that we can get it down how y'all want it to go.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll mention part of, like, one of the things I brought up, and we talked about it in leadership today, and Amber had the perfect answer for it. Was one of the things I was thinking was every other year we have new counselors coming in, which you guys will appreciate this. You're asked to vote for a mayor, and generally you don't know any of us. And so it puts you in a very tough spot. And so one of the things I suggested was every other year, the current sitting council would elect the leadership positions because they're with them every day and they've been with them all year. But then Amber brought up a really good point and said, it doesn't bring you guys into the process. And not only that, but you may be just coming on council and want to run for one of those leadership spots, and this would eliminate the ability for you to do that. And so I kind of like the way we do it now. And I believe the way we do it is once we take the straw vote, if somebody has a majority of the votes, I think it's 5, then they automatically move on. And in the event that doesn't happen, then we just keep voting, and the lowest one drops off until you have one left. But if anybody has any other ideas that might work better, sit with you better, we'd love to hear it. Lisa?
Well, I do think that was even when we were elected, and I believe that we were even hesitant on even voting because we had no clue. And so
I actually didn't vote, so you are correct.
And so it was because we just had no idea of who even wanted to run. So historically, when I've served on multiple other boards and things of that nature, everybody was present, and then basically you would put in something, whether it was in writing or something, of why you felt like you would qualify to run for this position and why, at least have something. So we have new council members coming in voting for people who have zero clue about anybody. And so that's part of the confusion, I think, is just that I think that it's very difficult to vote for somebody when you have no idea. And so it's that piece of it, I think, that we need to perfect a little bit better.
One of the things Ray did bring up in leadership that I could get behind and was a great idea, actually, is once we have our nominations, that the night before the straw poll or that night, each one of those individuals that are running for an office get 5 minutes to talk to the council in a work session and explain to them what they've done, where they want to go, why they want to run for leadership, almost literally campaign to your fellow people at the table. Number one, it would give everybody an idea of how their last year has gone, what they plan on doing the next year, and for new people, it would give them a great idea where they're going. So I got behind Ray on that. I think that's a fantastic idea. Amber, you had something, yes?
I agree with that, and I do like the idea of doing it in a work session if staff thinks that's appropriate, because I like the idea of the public being able to tune into that as well if they would choose to. I also I think ranked choice voting tends to be, in my experience, a good way of doing it. So I would be in favor of codifying ranked choice rather than a runoff as our mechanism that we use. I think that it's easier, clearer, and also provides, I think, more. When I cast a ranked choice vote, I feel like my positions and the nuances of my position are more likely to be reflected in the outcome. So I would advocate that.
Much like we did this year,
Yep.
correct? Okay, understood. Steve?
I think the floor and, basically the clerk and the attorney counting the votes is an excellent way of going about that part of it. I do not like the ranked choice voting. You can actually wind up with somebody that didn't necessarily get all of the first place votes winning an election, which that kind of defeats the purpose of some of the others. You're going to wind up kicking somebody out along the way regardless. I think we ought to go back to the way we've done it for the last, this last year was the first year we've done ranked voting. So I would like to see us go back to the way it was.
Okay. There's plenty to discuss and we've got time. So Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. I guess I would be curious to learn. I'm also a fan of the ranked choice voting, but I'd be curious to learn about what the previous elections looked like.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah,
Ray's going to speak to that right now, Kyle. So
I don't know the years, but we've done ranked election or straw polls for 3-4 years.
I think 2.
2 years. 2 years at least. So I mean, we've done it that way, and so that's my understanding of it. And do you know why we went to ranked choice?
Your Honor, if I may.
please.
Yes, so several years ago when we would do it, we only had a few people run for each, so we only had 2 names on the ballot for vice mayor and mayor. And 2 years ago was the first time, I believe it was 2 years ago, was the first time that we had multiples in both the mayor and the vice mayor category, where you could have a tie, you could have the non-majority candidate win because they would have maybe 4 votes, and the others would have a few each as well. So we wouldn't have the actual majority. And so because of that, that's why we looked at what we could do and we came up with ranked choice. We pitched that to the council at the time and they were favorable, so that's what we went with, so that we would make sure we had a majority that selected the actual mayor, so that we wouldn't have a tie or have to do a runoff. So that's why, it was because in the past, we usually only had, as far as my time here, we've only had 2 people for each.
Kyle? Can't hear you, bud. You're muted.
Thanks.
There you go.
COVID, I don't get as much practice as I used to. I guess.
Especially in the garage,
I guess my
understand.
question is maybe to Steve, what is the benefit of a runoff over a ranked choice? In my mind, a ranked choice vote is essentially I'm submitting 3 ballots for a runoff just all at the same time. So I'm just curious why you preference with a runoff.
That's the way I've grown up in every election that I've ever voted in for the last 50 years.
Jenna? Did you have something?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. Steve, I do, and Kyle, I understand Steve's concern too, that if somebody got every second place vote and there were 3 people and they split first and third, the second place, that never even got a first place vote could end up winning. I get that, but I guess that would be the average of.
No. It's one of the issues they've come up with in Alaska as well, because Alaska has gone to ranked choice voting for their senators and representatives, and if there's been those issues there.
Well, I do know that we are asking for direction tonight, and they would like us to somehow codify what it is that we would like to see or how we would like to see it done. That requires a majority. So if we could continue the discussion at least till we can kind of come to some type of a consensus, that would be good. So, Mr. Bond, are you raising your hand, sir?
No,
Okay, sorry.
sorry, I just came back on screen.
Oh, that's okay. So I personally, I don't care how we do it. I would like to see us, I guess maybe not have 5 people on the ballot for one leadership spot. You know what I mean? But I don't make that choice. It's entirely up to each one of us to who we nominate and how that goes about. But other than ranked voting, once you have more than 2 or 3 people on that ballot, I don't know how you do it without sitting here all night, kicking one out and doing it again and kicking one out and doing it again. Ranked voting seems to be the only way to actually get to where you want to go in a fairly timely manner. And it did, obviously it worked out in my favor last time. But that has nothing to do with my ideology behind it. I just think it's probably the best way for us to do it. But yes, Amber.
I mean, I think with a potential ballot maximum 8, presumably that somebody else has to run for vice mayor, right, or the alternate office, it probably, to me, doesn't matter that much. Either we're going to cast 1 ranked choice ballot, or we're going to cast 1 to 3 runoff processes. So I don't think it's going to go on and on. If people are more comfortable with the runoff process, I mean, I think it'll get us to the same place. You just have to vote potentially multiple times. But I think still, then the same thing's going to happen if you voted for the person who got kicked out of the ballot. Then you're going to pick your second choice, and that's what you would have done on a ranked choice ballot. But you do it manually instead, and you count each one. But I don't think it's going to be an hours-long process, just because we can't potentially have that many.
That's fair. That's fair. One of the other issues I see too, and I used to be a huge proponent of this, is I don't like to see, and this is just a personal thing, I don't like to see the same person run for both seats, because I think it clogs up the ballot. I think it clogs up the process. But then again, if you don't win one of them, it still offers you an opportunity to be into leadership. So I understand that argument as well. So I don't know that there should ever be a limit on, if you want to run for both, and hope you get one of them if that's what your goal is. So I don't know. Anybody have any? So we've got some that like the runoff, some that like the.
Well,
can we ask Fleur, since she's
sure
managed
what
both
works?
styles?
Yeah. Would you mind if we ask you? You've seen both sides. What works best in your opinion?
Your Honor, counselors, I think that both can work with the multiple having numerous people on each. The ranked choice did seem like it would be more efficient. And I think the basic reason that we suggested it was so that you didn't have to come out and say, okay, this person has the least amount of votes, and announce that. So that person then has to be removed out. You can just do it in the back and take them out and then go to the next one. And in our history of using ranked choice, we've never had to actually remove anybody. They've received the first place votes. So we haven't actually had to do that, but if you had to come out and tell everybody, it just is a little less comfortable.
I understand that. Steve?
If we're gonna publish them the way we did this year, it doesn't matter.
Well, I don't know that, and I love the transparency of it, but I don't think those should be published. I don't believe.
I'm just saying, if we do,
I mean, like, I think it's fine if it's published because it leads to the transparency of everything. And we're not in grade school, we're adults. So, so our feelings are not that sensitive. I'd like to think that our feelings are not that sensitive. And if they are, maybe we're not in the right position that we should be. I'm just.
but that's what I was getting at is Fleur is worried about kicking somebody out. And if we're gonna publish them, to me, that becomes
I don't think she's.
point.
I think she's just worried about protecting people's feelings.
Right? Yeah, I would make sure that we could, kind of maybe keep confidential who's, especially in the straw poll, who votes for who, if they want to. Publishing is innocuous to me, but I think what we need to do is we just need to, look at one way to do it, because on the many years that I've gone through the system, sometimes it seems like, oh, let's do it this time, let's do it this way. And so I think if we just stay with one way, I think if we do it transparently and we work through it, I think it's an easy process to do that. I don't think we should overthink it.
Right.
It's a straw poll, and I think we should do that and being able to do what's best for the council.
Well, keep in mind, if you want to be transparent, you can do it like the county does, and you do it right out in the open. There is no writing on a ballot. You say, boom.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
To that point, thank you, Council. The idea of the straw poll is so that you can do this in an executive session. And remember, it's not the official vote. Any official action has to be taken in a public meeting. And so while it's certainly within your purview as a council to publish the results, it really, at that point, what's the point of doing it in an exec session? To the mayor's point, you might as well just go out and do it in a public session. So, as I'm listening to this, and we're talking about voting and this, that, and the other, my attorney hat's shaking because I'm like, no, you're not actually voting until you're in the public session. And I think how you choose to handle the straw vote process in the executive session is really, it is up to you as a council to decide. And I think there's a lot of flexibility in that. Just the caveat being that it's always the official vote that's, in the public meeting that's gonna.
I was gonna say, I don't think our straw poll has been in the executive session.
No, it's always been public.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been in the work session.
But it was done on a piece of paper that was then taken into the back room and counted.
Yeah.
This year was the first time the results had ever been released.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so again, that's within your purview because it's not official.
I was just gonna say, honestly, it doesn't make a difference for staff. Whatever makes council the most comfortable, it's easy, as Councilor Pollock mentioned, it's easy enough to do runoffs. There's
Sure.
not that many people, whatever council wishes.
Okay. Mr. Bond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to kind of reiterate Carter's point about and he raised some really good points that I think create a rationale for memorializing this and putting it into a policy. Is that I think it does create transparency. So whether it's straw poll, just the whole process of all the issues that Carter mentioned, I think those were really good, and I think it would create a better transparency to the public, and it would give us a rational and defensible method for how we go about electing leadership, and I think that's always good for public.
I agree with you, and I also agree with Ray's thought that whoever's on that ballot gets their 5 minutes of time to speak, not only to council but to the public that'll be watching, explaining why they feel they should be in that leadership role. I like that idea, and so I guess what we really need to decide then is: do we want to keep the straw poll the way we do it with the numerical system, or do we want to do a straw poll with a runoff system, dropping one as we go in the event that somebody doesn't have the 5 majority votes? If they do, neither system matters.
I guess I would advocate let's do the rank system. And, you know, I feel like it's been working, feel like it's been fair. And it would seem to me that it's easiest for not only for the staff, which I think we should think about the staff a little bit too, the process they go through. And so I would advocate for the rank system.
I'm with Ray. The only question I would add to that is, would you prefer that then those results are published at the end of the straw poll? Or where are we at on that? See, that's what caused, in my opinion, that's what caused the public stuff, was because of who got selected, which happened to be me. So it gave them 2 months to start lobbying, you know, counselors. And so do we want to go through all that? That's entirely up to you guys. It doesn't matter to me. Yes, ma'am.
I think my preference would be to be very clear about the process and publish the process. And the rest of it is an internal process that, like, ultimately the result that matters is who was elected. If this is the process and this is how we did it, I don't think it's germane for people to understand who got second, who got third, how we got there. I think what's important is that they understand the process we're going to use, how we're going to do it, how we're going to count the votes, and then the important element of that is who won.
I agree.
That's a good point.
Steve?
I believe by doing it in a work session or in a public meeting, I believe through a Freedom of Information Act, they could request the results of that ballot.
I would agree with you, but what we would more than likely do, and I mentioned work session inadvertently because we generally do that in executive session. And so, is that not true?
We could do it in a work
No, we have
Go
never
ahead.
done it in a work session.
I think we did.
Exec. No.
No, it's in public.
Oh, it is in public?
Well,
Yeah.
actually, during my tenure in this organization, I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
And so, the ordinance, as your city attorney correctly indicated, allows you to use executive session for these kinds of things, but councils have been mixed as to how they want to use exec. And so that'd be something we'd like to get your blessing on as well. There's a list of questions, I think, that given the right time, would be interesting to hear which way you'd like to go.
Jenna?
I think Eric had something to say first. Were you?
Mayor, no, I would just echo that, and the statute allows that as well. I mean, you can deliberate on personnel issues, election issues of leadership in an executive session. You could, under the ordinance and statute, do it in an executive session. That doesn't mean that you have to. And I think if you did it in the executive session, then arguably the results of that straw poll, those internal discussions, would not be a public record. So really, it's up to council to decide, you know, how do you want to do it, and to the city manager's point, I think history is split in terms of how it's been done.
Go ahead.
I like the idea of executive session and ranked.
Let me ask you how this would sit with you. What if, during the work session, that particular evening, next November, if you will, during the work session, the folks that have been nominated for mayor and vice mayor get their 5 minutes in front of the public and in front of the council during work session. Then, that night in executive session, we do the straw poll and we can announce the winners of those, and we're done.
Is that necessary?
Go ahead.
Is that necessary for them to do? Is a 5 minute in there? I mean, it's an internal discussion. You know what I mean? As far as that, so is it necessary to do this 5 minutes and open up that potential?
It's not necessary to do the 5 minutes in front of the public, but I think it is necessary to allow those folks running for those positions to have that 5 minutes. Specifically, every other year when we have new counselors coming in that don't know anybody, it would give them an opportunity to understand who the people are, why they feel they should have that position, et cetera.
So, can I follow up?
Of course.
Sorry, I'm like bad at this. So, can all of that be done in an executive session? I just feel like you're going to be opening up a can of worms with the public and everything. Not that they don't have their voice, but with the stuff that happened, I don't know.
It could certainly be.
But you see what I'm kind of trying to say.
It could certainly all be done in executive session, but I will tell you, it's going to open a can of worms no matter what you do, because people in Casper do not understand a city manager form of government. And I will give you the perfect example. We just spent 2 days in Cheyenne with SLIB, and I had plenty of time to visit with the Cheyenne mayor, and they are a mayoral form of government. Now, this guy's sharp. He knows he has his financial background, he knows how to HR, he knows how to run people. The problem is, and I have to be very careful how I say this because it's a public meeting, there have been prior mayors in Cheyenne that were voted on popularity that know nothing about budgets, nothing about finances, nothing about how to run a 500 crew employee. And that's why the city manager form of government that we have works so well, because we have a guy that knows his business from top to bottom. So the mayor in Casper is primarily a ceremonial position. However, it does have some punch with it too, because, I mean, Carter could tell you, I spoke to SLIB yesterday on the floor, and we walked out of there with $2 million today. And it was a direct result of the conversation that I had with them. So it does matter who's in this position sometimes. It does matter. It just does. And it's also very time consuming. I can tell you, since I've been in office, it's been not even, well, today will be 2 months. So out of those 60 or 58, 59 days, I will bet you I have had to appear 50 times out of the 59. And that includes the weekends. It's a very busy post, and it's ceremonial, but it's also very busy. And it matters in some instances. Like with SLIB, had we not gone in front of them, we wouldn't have got that $2 million. I guarantee it, right? We weren't even on the fund list. We went, talked to them. I talked to them, and they moved us over to the fund list, and they gave us some money today. I mean, it was a miracle, right? And thankful. But so there's a lot of things to balance. Kyle, go ahead. You're muted again. You're muted, Kyle.
I'll get it.
There you go. It comes from being in the garage. I get it.
Yeah. I'd agree with you on the council manager form of government, by the way. But I wanted to advocate that, so I'm a fan of folks having a little bit of podium time to present their case why they would be the best fit for the position, but I would actually prefer that to be after the new council is seated, because the way our current system is set up, new council members do have the opportunity to run for those positions if they'd like, and if you have those presentations before the new council is seated, those council members won't have an opportunity to present their case. And so I would recommend that it occur after the first of the year. And then there was discussion about what the value is of the straw poll that we take in November. And I actually like the straw poll because, as has been discussed, new council members might not necessarily know the people running for leadership very well, and they can kind of lean on the straw poll because that's what the previous council, who they would have decided for leadership. And so if they don't feel comfortable or informed enough, they can kind of lean on what the past council thought would be the best candidates for leadership. And so I like the straw poll happening in November. I think we should keep it. And I think any presentations by leadership applicants should be after the first of the year when we take the actual poll, so that new council members can have the opportunity if they'd like.
Well, I'm gonna refer to Fleur, but I don't believe statutorily it can be done like that, because I think you have to seat your leadership at the first meeting of the calendar year. And so what would happen is we would have to reach out to any new incoming people and get them on board and get them coming to meetings and get them involved through the process that way, if that's something they were interested in doing. I believe, is that correct, Fleur?
Your Honor, I think the city attorney is raising his hand as well, so maybe he wants to take it. But we do have a city charter ordinance that says it has to be the first meeting that they're seated.
Right.
That's correct. So it's just, so the ordinance provides that the new members have to be seated, and the election of leadership takes place after those new members are seated. So at the first meeting in January. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Bruce, follow up if I may.
Yes, please.
That makes sense. Then I would, like you discussed, I would like for the oncoming council members to have that opportunity beforehand. Thank you.
I think that's fair. Amber?
Yeah, so for me, that would be a non-issue, because we invite the oncoming council members to that work session so they can participate in the straw poll. So I don't see what would preclude them, if they were running for a position, to also make their 5-minute case at that same
True.
session.
Even if they're not seated.
True.
Even if they're not seated, they could still give their presentation just as they cast their straw poll vote
True.
in that same. So I
That
think
is
you
true.
could handle it in the current format.
Thank you. Steve?
I think part of what you're talking about runs into an issue with executive session because the non-seated council members cannot be in the executive session, so they therefore could not vote on the ballot.
They don't get to vote until January, until they're seated.
They wouldn't be able to vote in the straw poll.
They don't vote in the straw poll. They never have.
Yes, they did.
The incoming? In the straw poll.
Yes, they did.
I can hear the attorney's wheels turning back here. The only vote that takes place is on the floor.
Right.
But straw poll participation has included oncoming council before they're sworn in.
How can we do that in executive session?
So
can't.
Mayor,
That was my
council, who attends an executive session is up to the governing body.
Oh, okay.
We need to invite
So
them.
you can invite them. There's nothing legally that precludes them from being a part of the executive.
Okay.
So there's that.
Okay, well, I knew that we had a couple of executive sessions and the elects had been invited out.
Right,
So-
because it didn't involve them. So, but I guess if we wanted them in, we could have, now that we
Okay.
know that. Okay, so let me, if I think I have kind of the ideology here, we would like to do this in executive session. We would allow for anyone that is nominated for either spot, mayor or vice mayor, a 5-minute presentation, if you will, as to why they feel they should be in that leadership spot. And we will invite, on every other year, we will invite the incoming newly electeds into that executive session to partake in the straw poll. And the last thing, if I am correct, is we would like to do, compared to the runoff or the ranked, to stick to the ranked system. Does that sound like I have it? Sorry, go ahead.
I would say, I'll make one last pitch for, I believe that the 5-minute should be in public rather than in a work session, for the reason that we are still, through our vote of who leadership is, we are representing our constituents in that vote. And so to me, it's not a bad thing if they are able to hear who's doing what. They may then start lobbying us for, vote this way or vote that way, just as they would on any other action that we would take. So I would like to see, if the public chooses to engage with their representatives in that way, I think that's appropriate. And so I would like to see the pitch be made in public. I mean, I don't want to open the can of worms, but if the public, is really inclined to one candidate over the other, I do think it's not inappropriate for them to make that opinion known to us for our decision-making.
In that event, then I would ask you, would we do the 5-minute pitch one week and then the straw poll the week after, so that you allow those constituents time to communicate with you before we vote? Because if we do the 5-minute pitch, then go into executive session, there's no time for them to get a hold of you in order to.
We'd need to anyway, unless we wanted to call a special meeting, because we can only go into exec in a regular meeting, right? So we would have to call a special meeting after a work session to go into exec and then come back out. So it would make more sense to do it in a work session following regular meeting, have an executive session after that meeting.
The following week. That sounds good to me. Is everybody okay with that and the way we outlined it? And do the ranked voting and,
Have some,
Yeah.
we have disagreement on where the 5 minutes should lie, I think. So maybe
We do?
maybe we need a vote just on that element.
sure.
Mr. Mayor, let me offer just one small suggestion. You in your rundown of the ideology, you hit on 3 major points in my understanding. Certainly the ranked choice versus runoff would be one. The other was using the work session for a public sort of selling of virtues and interests for those that are being nominated. And then the other one that I saw was using exec or not for the actual tally of the straw poll. I do have others that I'd like to run by you too, but
Sure.
but in my estimation, if we could do thumbs up or down on each of those items, I think then we'd have a lot more clarity with respect to what is the will of council.
Okay, so we're going to go either ranked or straw poll. So if you are okay with the ranked, can I please have a thumbs up? If you would rather have, well, we've got a majority there, so we will go with the ranked voting. Okay, so that's number one. Secondly, if you are okay with the 5-minute presentation for those running for those office, 3 minutes?
Yes.
Well, nobody's going to use all 5 minutes anyway.
That's why I said go with 3.
Well, we'll do 5 because that's what we do in public meetings and everything else. So is everybody okay with doing that publicly during a work session? Thumbs up, please. Okay, so we're good there.
Okay.
And then lastly, well, not lastly, but thirdly, would everybody prefer to do the straw poll in executive session and include every other year those incoming new folks? Are we good with that? Okay, now, with that said, the last thing is we are not going to publish the results from A to B. We're just going to announce the winners to the public because it's an executive session and that's why we're in executive session. So, so everybody's okay with that as well?
If the public had requested the polls to be published, then how does that?
It's an executive session. The public can know who won. That's how it works. We're transparent through the entire process, and the only ones that know the results of those are Fleur and our city attorney. So if they've got an issue with their integrity, I guess that's a whole nother ballgame. But, okay, and then you had some more you thought you might want to add?
If that's okay. So it does sound like you want only the oncoming council on those off years to participate. Is that what I'm hearing?
With the regular council as well.
Right. So those council that are continuing and those council that are coming in new would be the only ones that participate on that every other year.
Correct. The outgoing council would not have a vote, just like now.
The offgoing would not have a vote.
Correct.
Okay.
But there would be 12 people in the
room.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be more in the room.
They'd be in the room, but they wouldn't be voting.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the other things is a real small item, and I think we're there. But I just want to double check. The statutes do not require the attorney and the clerk to do the tally kind of removed from the council. Is that okay to incorporate that into the policy, that the attorney and the clerk are the ones responsible for that actual tally?
It is. It's okay with me. Is that okay with everyone else? Unless you want the current mayor to do it. Oh, I won. No, I'm kidding.
I've been happy with that.
I'm kidding. Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Clerk and attorney's good.
Yep.
Perfect. And then the other question that I had was, I'm still a little confused about the timing as to the actual vote. If I'm understanding correctly, and I'm making an assumption here, the timing of the actual vote that takes place on the floor, we all know needs to take place during the first meeting of the year, right? Sort of the inaugural meeting of the year. It sounds like that would be the actual first item of the new council that's being seated. Is that a fair statement?
Just like it was this year. Yeah, or like it's always been.
No, I think actually the old council has to approve the minutes.
Right.
And the bills and claims, then you swear in.
He said it would be the first action for the newly seated council.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
yes, do that first, then seat.
Correct.
Then vote.
Yeah.
Newly seated council. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, I just want to be sure I understood that crystal clear.
But yeah, the old council has to take care of that other business first.
Right. Right. Are there
anything else?
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
have one question.
Sure, shoot.
Do we have any policy or do we need any policy about retaining the ballots? Should there be any sort of inquiry or discrepancy?
What do you guys normally do with the Fleur?
We seal them and put them in the vault.
There you go.
As a part of the executive session.
And how long do you keep? Will they stay there forever? Or?
I think we've been retaining them forever.
Okay.
I say they don't come up in a puff of white or black.
So I would assume we would incorporate that and keep that system.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Well, and I
We don't
would
have any
say
chimneys here.
Oh.
Any real
talk to whatever the state retention
Vatican.
Yes, for executive session. So, okay.
I've got a chimney.
So just so you know, the state has a statute concerning executive session minutes and things that have to be saved. So we would just continue on with that process.
Follow that. Okay. And then one last piece that I want to be sure, again, I understand just crystalline, is with regard to the actual nomination process. Right now, the clerk receives the nominations, and as we all know, it can be self-nominated, it can be nominated from colleagues and so on. Typically what she'll do is confirm with each of the nominees to make sure that they're comfortable actually accepting that nomination, regardless of what calling we might be talking about, what office we might be talking about. And then pursuant to that survey, if you will, the clerk reveals those choices to the voting members. And again, I'm using voting kind of loosely here. So that everybody knows who's actually not only been nominated, but accepted nomination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything we need to clarify beyond that, Fleur?
I think just making sure that that's still okay with everyone. Everyone's comfortable submitting those nominations and.
So it's literally going to be a 3-week process because you're going to nominate the first week. You're going to, during a council meeting, I imagine, or at some point, because in the work session, they'll present their case and then they'll be voted on in the executive session. So it's a 3-week process as it is. I guess it could be a 4-week process if you want to do the nominations during the work session the prior. So, but actually the nominating could be done in the pre-meeting like we've always done before that meeting. So it could still continue to be a 3-week process if that works for everybody. Yep, okay. Is everybody else okay with that? I don't want to presume. Steve, Jenna, everybody good? Ray? Okay. That's the way we'll do it. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Kyle? Okay. All right, very good. Is there anything else concerning that item, sir?
I think we covered it.
Okay, I think we have a clear path now, and that should alleviate a lot of just headaches because we've hashed it for about 20 minutes now. Okay, let's move on to the creation. I'm sorry, do you have something else?
I did think.
Go ahead.
Since you brought up to me, can we be clear in the resolution what we mean by ranked choice? Like the process that we will go through to tally ranked choice votes?
In the language of the.
Yeah, one of my constituents suggested that there might be multiple interpretations for how ranked choice, what happens, should there be.
Fleur, do you want to speak to that, how you interpret that to be, the ranked choice?
Sure. Do you want me to speak to how we've done it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes. So, and it used to be, and it still is, on the ballot. They actually put a little blurb about how it would be counted. And essentially, what we did was we tallied the first place, so everyone's first choice. So we had whoever was nominated. We had candidate A, B, C, and then we went through and counted each ballot and said, okay, A has 1, B, and we go through all of them. And then if there isn't a majority at that point, what we would do is count the person who has the least amount of tallies, so those are only the first place, that person would be removed. And then you'd go to the second place on the 2 remaining candidates, or however many remaining candidates, and you just work your way down. That's how we did it. As I stated before, we've never had to count somebody off and then recount. We only tallied the first place and we had a majority of 5 or more.
Thank you.
Yes, we can spell that out in the resolution.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else with that, let's move on to the creation of LAD 159 Westridge Improvements. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, we have an opportunity to engage in another local assessment district, which is the mechanism by which public improvements can occur in conjunction with private improvements in order to consolidate costs as much as possible, gain cost efficiencies for both the city as well as the private property owner that might be adjacent to the public work in play. In this particular case, we're talking about the Westridge neighborhood. The staff has been meeting with neighbors in that area and have laid out a plan. You will have the opportunity to engage in the steps of the formal process that the creation of this LAD includes. And we didn't want you starting that process without being aware of the steps we've taken to get this started with respect to the scope of the project being identified and the improvements being identified, and with regard to also what some of the feedback has been from the neighbors. So if I could turn some time to Mr. Beamer to walk us through all that, hopefully that'll get you ready for the formal adoption and those steps that are coming up.
Mr. Beamer.
Mayor, council, in your packet is the PowerPoint presentation that was given to the neighborhood last month. And it has a map in there of what we're talking about with West Ridge improvements. It's just west of the West Side Albertsons in that neighborhood and north of CY Avenue in that general vicinity. We're talking about roughly 100 properties, maybe 5 blocks or so. Is that correct? I've got Alex Vita, city engineer, with me tonight, and Shane Porter, our consulting engineer with WLC. If there's any questions I cannot answer, but that's the neighborhood. There we go. It probably doesn't give you enough, but there's CY. Albertsons will be to the east of this, just to give you a general vicinity of where we're looking at. Total project costs, this is complete reconstruction. Back of walk to back of walk, take out everything. Also doing water mains, sewer mains, storm sewer improvements. Total project costs of roughly $2.2 million. The LAD assessment would assess the property owners for the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, and if they need to replace their sewer service line to the sewer main. So an average assessment of roughly $6,400 per resident out there. Spread out over 10 years at a 3% interest rate. It's roughly an annual assessment of $750 per year per household. The neighborhood meeting was, like I said, last month. The general consensus was pretty favorable to move ahead with this project. If you recall from the pavement management system study that we had done, this is one of the worst streets, or neighborhoods, I should say, in the entire city. There was some photos in your package that show some of the general conditions of the neighborhood. The other cost would be borne by the 1 cent 16 allocation we have for streets and storm sewer. The water fund would also pick up a good portion of it, as would the sewer fund. So a total of $2.2 million, $660,000 roughly, of which would be borne by the neighborhood. And with that, Mayor, Council, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, please. Lisa?
2 questions. So you had said $750 a year, but for how many years? And then secondly, so this is Orangeburg that we're replacing, correct?
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. I'll answer your first one first. $750 per year for 10 years.
10 years, okay.
Yeah, 10-year assessment. But again, council can change that at duration. If you think it should be spread out over 20 years at 3%, council has that authority to do so. But that's what is presented currently for council consideration and ultimately for the neighborhood consideration, for them to be able to vote if they want to participate in this LAD or not. Orangeburg.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Second question was if the sewer services were mainly Orangeburg. I would guess that the majority of these services are probably clay tile still.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I know that as soon as you start changing out their sewer main in the street, that the residences, some of those sewer lines will fail. And so it's inevitable. So then the homeowner is then going to have to shoulder the burden of now having to replace their sewer lines from their house to the street because the city is doing that. So that's an additional burden to these citizens.
Mayor, Councilor, typically if we can't get a good connection from this main to the sewer service, we will back it up until we can actually make that a good connection.
Okay.
So.
At the city's expense, yes.
At the city's expense.
Okay.
Correct. The replacement of the sewer main is on the city's expense.
Right.
And will be borne by the sewer fund.
Okay. Kyle? Did you have something?
I did, thank you.
Sure.
On page 14 in our packet, it says water services to be replaced to curb stop if they are found to be lead. I was just curious, is that a possibility at all?
Mayor, Councilor, there's probably a fair chance that we may encounter some lead services in this neighborhood. It's very unusual for us to encounter lead services past the curb stop going into the actual property, because lead services, believe it or not, were expensive, and the cities were usually the only ones that actually put it in, and from the curb stop in, the plumbers would usually go with a cheaper service material.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, please.
I'm ignorant. Could you please educate me on these assessments that are over the 10-year or 20-year if we decide, but it sounds like we're on 10 right now. When a property owner sells their home, does that go with the property? What does that look like when the house transfers ownership? Thank you.
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. That's a natural lien that's placed against the property.
So I can answer that.
Go ahead, please.
So it is a lien, but it's also, if you go to your assessor's page, like on natrona.net, they have got it, and so you'll have your special districts or whatever that cost. So residents can either pay in full early, or they can just make those payments. But when you sell a house, that is part of the sale contract, so the new buyer will have to understand that they will then have to make those payments to the city.
Thank you.
Seems like a decent trade-off for awesome roads and sidewalks. Go ahead, Amber. Did you have something?
Andrew, can you spend a little time talking to us? Our last experience with the LAD, there was a lot of discussion around how we were divvying up the total amount among property owners. So can you give us a little? It looks like it's the width, I'm assuming, of the frontage of the lot. Is that essentially like kind of how many feet of curb you're dealing with?
Mayor, Councilor, this is a little more straightforward than what you were accustomed to with Coach Road, where they had those flag lots, if you recall, and then big lots behind the right-of-way.
Yeah.
These frontages are all relatively static in the fact that maybe they all have 40 feet or maybe an 80-foot frontage, and so they'll be assessed accordingly how much frontage they have on the right-of-way. And they'll only be assessed if we actually have to replace their sewer service on an individual basis. So it's on the street frontage.
Sure. Okay. So follow.
Yes, please.
So theoretically, we won't see as wide of a gap between the highest paying property owners and the lowest paying property owners, or will they be relatively evenly distributed?
Mayor, Councilor, I would say that's probably accurate. I think there is probably some consideration for corner lots, when those assessments get spread out amongst the entire neighborhood and they only get assessed for their long frontage on the street. So I think in those regards, you're going to see some they're not going to range as drastically like you saw with Coach Road.
Mr. Cathy?
That's what I was going to ask. This actually says the Long Lake would be distributed. So is that,
Mayor, Councilor, I had it reversed.
okay, so if you had an 80 by 120, you're only going to pay 80, and then the 120 would be split amongst everybody else.
Mayor, Councilor, that's correct.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Beamer concerning this LAD? It will be coming forward, I would assume, next week for
Mayor, Councilor, just to go through the process again, next week, you will get a resolution with a notice of intent to create the LAD. And then that will start the notification process, formal notification process for the neighborhood and the ordinance creation. And then there'll be 3 passages of the ordinance, of which if 50% of the residents oppose and they have formal objection, the LAD will fail.
Okay.
So that is the process.
Mr. Bond, you have something?
Yeah, Andrew, I just want to clarify the amount that will be assessed for each property owner. It was $750 per year for a 10-year, over 10 years. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilor, that is correct. An average of $6,400 per property owner. If you spread that out over 10 years at a 3% interest rate, it's roughly $750 per year over 10 years.
Okay, and do you know so would it be essentially cut in half if it was spread out over 20 years then?
Mayor, Councilor, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Thank you.
Andrew, let me ask you, what happens if the LAD does fail with the sewer and water and streets in this particular neighborhood?
Mayor?
Thank you.
That's a very good question. You've got 2 options. You fund their improvements with our 1 cent 16 allocation and we push off some other capital improvement needs, or we simply kill the project.
Thank you. Do you have a feeling, by any chance, what, just preliminarily, what the feeling is in that neighborhood for the appetite, I guess, for new streets and sewer and water?
Mayor, based on the feedback from Alex and Shane back there, it was relatively favorable. So I think you're going to see a favorable passage of the LED, but there's no doubt you'll have some residents out there adamantly opposed.
Oh, sure, of course. Thank you. Do you gentlemen have anything you needed to add?
I didn't. No.
Okay. Okay, very good. Anybody else have anything? Kyle, please.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm just looking forward and just trying to imagine how this is going to be received by people. And I imagine that there's going to be folks that are wondering why they have to help pitch in for the effort. It makes sense to me, knowing that property owners are responsible for the maintenance of their sidewalk. This seems to be just a coordinated effort to, the street really needs replaced, and while we're doing the street, might as well do the sewer. While we're doing the sewer and street, might as well do the sidewalk. And so it's just kind of the coordination of all these at the same time to realize an efficiency. So I'm on board with it, but I'm still confused. So when the city of Casper, so for instance, I live out in River West subdivision, we're expanding west towards the byway. The developer of those neighborhoods, are they the ones that initially pay for the cost of constructing the sidewalk and the road, and is that built into the home prices, or does the city pay for the cost of street and curb once a developer agrees to develop land? Could you speak to that a little bit more, Beamer?
Sure. Mayor, Councilor.
Please.
Yeah, the initial cost for development is always borne by the developer, so they have to pay for the curb and gutter, they pay for the sidewalks, they pay for the underground utilities, including the water mains, sewer mains, stormwater, street surfacing. That is all borne by the developer and included in the price of the home.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Kyle? Okay, does anybody else have any more questions? I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just one more question about Andrew. Maybe you might have mentioned this, so I apologize. But can you tell me how, or someone else, about how property owners are notified about the public hearings? Will that be a direct mail, or how will that take place?
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. Once the adoption of the resolution is passed, we will send out letters, certified letters to every property owner, notifying them of the notice of intent to create the LED and what their assessment is going to be and the mechanism of the assessment and their ability to file objection to that assessment. So they'll have,
thank you, Andrew.
and they'll be notified of the upcoming council meetings where where the ordinance will be discussed and adopted.
Is that a majority rule then? You have 100 homes in a neighborhood, 51 of them say yay, it's a go? Is that how it works, or?
Mayor, in this situation, it's going to be very close to that, but it's by area.
Okay, gotcha.
It's by area, so.
But the majority is going to carry the day is?
Quite possibly, there could be one property owner that has multiple lots out there and they could sway it one way or another, but it's unlikely in this neighborhood.
Understood. Okay, anything else from council? Mr. Beamer, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe there was some direction requested. What direction were you looking for, actually?
The only direction we need, Mr. Mayor, is to be sure that you're comfortable with us proceeding for the formal portion of this process.
Is everyone okay with them going forward? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Sorry, I almost ran over you on that one.
No worries.
Okay, legislative update, Mr. City Manager, and there's a lot to talk about. A lot of good things to talk about.
Fortunately, there are some good things to talk about. We were, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Andrew, are you leaving?
I'm sitting right behind you.
I'll have questions for you later.
Certainly with respect to the legislative process, one of the things that I certainly have been keeping an eye on is with respect to direct distribution and what was going to happen there. Many of you probably saw a number of the alerts that came forward from WHAM, wherein they said, hey, this amendment's coming forward and this is what it'll do to, little cities, big cities, and everybody else and so on. We found out today that a number of the amendments that have come forward that certainly would have been negative to the city of Casper have failed. And it would appear at this point, unless something else weird happens, like the governor vetoes things or whatever, that the direct distribution, as we're familiar with it, along with the amendment that the governor originally proposed in his budget, is intact without amendment. And so we're very, very pleased that that's moving forward. And very grateful to the legislature.
And a veto is highly unlikely because they passed what he sent them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Did you see the email that came out today?
Yeah, it shows the actual distribution of it, the money and everything.
I did not look at that spreadsheet.
Yeah, I was looking at it.
Basically, it's on the governor's desk.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but it actually breaks it down by county and town.
Oh,
and
good.
Your distribution amount, the whole thing. I was just looking at it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I did not get a look at the spreadsheet yet, but good news. I'm just thrilled. That,
Awesome news.
And it stays with the previous distribution formula.
That's what I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Excelente.
Jolene, do you want to catch us up on a couple other items, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely, please. Yes.
Mayor, Council. So the other thing that passed on third reading today was the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, which when that is funded, we will start having the opportunity to put grants in for outdoor recreation in Casper. Second reading, that was in the Senate. Second reading in the House tomorrow. Passed today. So we'll be up for third reading likely tomorrow. The public improvements bill that Evansville started.
Before you go ahead, I'm sorry, Jolene, please forgive me. Can you speak to that? You just kind of went over it so fast. What's the benefit for us?
The benefit for the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund
Yes, please.
is that there will be a grant fund, a relatively large grant fund that is funded with money. Obviously with money.
Wow.
Funded with money.
I so thought it was donuts.
Yeah, me too.
Cookies.
Right.
So they have money set aside that's earning income. So it's a trust fund dedicated only to outdoor recreation, and it will be open to grants that the city of Casper and cities and the state parks will be able to write for having to do with outdoor recreation.
And as a follow-up to that, I believe Zulema has already sent in a grant application for some of that money. Or is in the process of
Mayor, Council,
sending it in?
Not yet.
Okay.
Because this one's not ready yet, but what you are speaking of is another opportunity that the legislature has funded for outdoor recreation grants as well. It's a whole different funding system that's going on. I believe it's ARPA money.
Okay.
Jolene, if you don't mind, and I did not mean to interrupt you, I apologize for that, but I kind of wanted to take them one at a time in case there were questions so we don't get lost. So, because I know one of the things somebody said is, we ice rink money. Well, it doesn't qualify because this is for outdoor rec.
It is outdoor.
Yeah.
So then on second reading that passed in the House today was the public improvements bill that Representative Chadwick was one of the authors of with the police chief from Evansville, And that gives us the buying power of $75,000 for our vehicles without having to get a bond. Getting bonds to purchase vehicles anymore is getting very, very difficult, and we're having a difficult time doing that. And so that will be a very nice addition for us. One thing that's a caution, that the Pharmacy or the Prescription Drug Transparency Act pass second reading today. If that does pass third reading tomorrow, the state health insurance, of which the city of Casper is a member of, will have an estimated $11 million per year increase. A $31 million increase Blue Cross Blue Shield people. So anybody that has prescription drug benefits as part of your health insurance will see they're predicting a very steep increase. So I don't know, I suppose tomorrow maybe we should get another email out from our council saying, please don't pass this on third reading. I believe you saw, I blind copy you on everything that I send, And I believe you saw the one that I sent that said, we were already having trouble paying for our services now. And if we add this to our expenses, this is not going to be a good day. So then on interim topics, let me tell you where we are with that. Revenue, local revenue source was one of our number one topics. In consultation with WHAM, that one is not moving forward. We didn't ask any of the revenue committee or any of our senators or representatives to sponsor that one. WHAM believes, and the leadership, WHAM, the mayors and city managers and administrators, believe that strategically now is not the right time to ask for local revenue, that it could actually be something that turns out to not be a good situation for local governments. And so they're holding on that until they believe that there is a better strategic time. The judiciary topics that were submitted, quite a few of those. I will tell you that Senator Landon and Representative Washut have agreed to take them on and see where they go with the Judiciary Committee. I believe that Representative Washut has been in contact with Chief McFeeters, or thought he was going to be, has not been in contact with him yet, but they will be looking, they're on the Judiciary, and they told me they would sponsor and look at the topics on all of those. Then the two topics that were left would have gone to the Corporations Committee. No one responded from the Corporations Committee, but WHAM is willing to take those two on and see what they can do with those. And that was the publishing the minutes online, and the other one was when state liquor laws change, that they automatically change at the local level so that we're not having to change the ordinance. So that's where we are with interim topics.
And I can tell you, after speaking with Dave Frazier, who is the executive director of WHAM, they are running at about a 79% clip on WHAM-sponsored things in the legislature. So they're having a lot of success. It's been a good year for municipalities and for WHAM. So, did you have anything else?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Steve?
What is the big push to give Big Pharma more money and raise every citizen in this state will be paying more?
Well, he'll give you the rundown on it, but the clouds behind it are supposed to help our local pharmacies, and really they're not. They're padding corporate.
Yeah.
Walmart's, Walgreens, they stand to make millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
So it's a bad deal, but it wouldn't hurt tomorrow's third reading if you guys get an opportunity tonight to send out an email. The links on your email from Jolene, it would not hurt. Those do work. I sent one on behalf of the city as the mayor to Senator Hicks because he kept tabling direct distribution over a hang-up that he had, and he got enough of those emails from us that it went through today. So they do matter. Those emails do matter.
So this, Mayor, councilors, this is in the House. So our representatives there are Washut. Let me see if I can go through all the Ward. I can send you the list. And, our Representative Chadwick, for example, has been very, very effective in helping us with direct distribution, et cetera. And so I think we have quite a few representatives who might be able to help out, and they've been very effective. And I would be happy to send that list tonight.
I'd appreciate it if you would send it to all of us, and if we get an opportunity, I would ask you to please send them out. It takes 5 minutes, but in fact, you only have to write one email and you can copy and paste it. But they do matter. So they do, and the city's going to take a big hit too, and their employees, as well as if you're on Blue Cross Blue Shield, you're going to get. Well, of course, even I have prescription coverage. I'm going to get nailed too, but so and Medicare, Medicaid, I imagine is going to take a whack too. So it's going to affect just about everybody. Everybody needs prescription drugs in one time or another in their life, generally. So, okay,
some of
Jolene.
us more than others.
Yeah, that's right. Jolene, thank you very much. Thanks. Did you have anything else on legislative,
No, sir.
Okay,
No,
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to add just on legislative update. I kind of touched on it earlier, but during the first round of ARPA release in October, Casper was up for a $3 million wastewater project. And the OSLI board, OSLI, recommended full funding for us, and we scored very high. But for whatever reason, the board, the 5 individuals on the board, which are Secretary of Public Instruction, which is Madam Dagenfelter, the Secretary of State, which is Mr. Gray, the Governor, Mark Gordon, Secretary of the Treasury, Kurt Meyer, and the last one is the State Auditor, Racinas. Those are the 5 that decide how this money is dispersed. Anyway, in their wisdom, they felt like Casper could come up with money on their own, and so they only funded $1 million of that $3 million project, even though OSLI said to fund the whole thing. And what they did is they took that $2 million and they dispersed it down the line to smaller communities. What that meant for this round, and Carter and Andrew and I went down Sunday, and so we just got home just in time for the meeting tonight. We were there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. If you were funded any amount of money the first round in October, any other projects you had automatically went to the no fund list. And so by us being there, I had an opportunity, luckily, with Carter and Andrew, to speak to that board and tell them how we felt that their process had been very unfair, that they weren't following their own guidelines, and that we really felt shorted here in Casper. And they had $49 million to let today, and they had 5 minutes left, and Casper was still without a penny. And luckily, Auditor Racinas said, hey, what about Casper? They took it in the shorts last time. It wasn't fair. She said, but so to be equitable, they gave us $2 million towards our other project at the wastewater. So we ended up getting $3 million out of the $6 million project. So we're going to get both projects completed now, thanks to those individuals giving us that money. So it was certainly a worthwhile trip on our part to go. We pulled in an extra $2 million we would have never seen. So it worked out really well. That was on a legislative end. That's why I brought it up now. So with that, let's move on to, did you have something on legislative? Okay. Let's move on to agenda review. Mr. City Manager, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, I'm referring to the grid document here that you're all probably getting very familiar with now. For the meeting of the 7th, which is next week, we've got the LGBTQ committee coming in to visit with the council. We also would like to talk to the council about a river grant that we have our eyes on that we think could be helpful to the project. We want you to be aware of that implication there. As we've already talked, we're going to have the LAD process start Tuesday night next week, and hopefully continue to move forward on the flag lot discussion as well that has generated some conversation, although this would be the 3rd reading that would take shape in. For the meeting of the 14th, our next work session, we want to talk to you about the lane extension proposal that Mr. Beamer and his team are considering for Poplar and CY. We're going to be taking quite a bit of time with you to talk about capital, which is a big part of the budgeting process that we are engaging on March 14th, coming up. We need, as a part of that, to talk to you about the River Fund and some of the capital ideas that we have in mind for that, too. We will be visiting with the new Platte River Trails Trust Director. While we have her here, we're going to talk about the EKW easement and what we have in mind for that. Moving into the 21st and pre-meeting, believe it or not, for those of you who've been on the council for a little while, the Napa IBS contract is ready for renewal, and we want to talk to you about lessons learned with regard to that arrangement, which I think has been a really good arrangement, really innovative opportunity.
Just for the record, I will be gone. That meeting, and Ray will run our regularly scheduled meeting on the 21st.
And I'll be on the 14th.
And then you'll be gone the 14th, yep. So Ray will run the 21st, and then the 28th, we will not have a meeting. That is spring break. You'll be gone. There will be a lot of people gone with their children, too. So we unfortunately canceled that meeting, especially during budget time. So with that said, be prepared more than likely down the road, we will probably have some special meetings 2-3 times a week to get the budget process hammered out and give Carter and his office enough time to navigate and fulfill the wishes and balance the budget.
And get guidance from all of you.
Right, absolutely.
All along the way.
Absolutely.
Not the least of which would be captured on April 25th, when you have the opportunity to review 1 cent applications. One of the decisions you need to make, actually, is with regard to whether or not you want to hear presentations from every single one of your applicants.
Do we make the decision that night, or do we make it now to set them up for that night?
Well, actually, you'll have that opportunity to chat about that on the 11th.
Okay.
And we will get that direction, which will obviously form and shape how the 25th
How long that meeting is, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
You guys have fun.
You gonna be gone, Steve?
Oh, yeah. I'll be in Athens.
Dirty. Greece? Oh, good for you. And jelly. Anything else on agenda, sir?
Well, the back page. I always like to be sure you look at the back page.
Look at
That's where we kind of have everything mapped out for the next several months. Indeed, we want to be sure that you're aware of what's on the horizon in case we're missing something. I want to be sure you are aware of what we see out there and so on.
Where are we at on the RFQs for the detox funding stuff since the county has decided to match us with that 130 or whatever it was?
We plan to bring that back to you in May with regard to the approach and what all is taking place. I noticed that Anna is having a meeting, I think she said tomorrow.
Monday, she said.
Monday, wherein the process to put that document together is underway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Absolutely.
So she's meeting with you and the county, I'm assuming, or someone from the city and the county in doing so?
Yes, and it would be most likely the individual that we have asked to help us write that.
Okay.
And that's Ms. Oster.
So are they going to facilitate it then, you think, the public health?
Well, they will be a partner.
Okay.
Yeah, they will be a partner.
Cool.
And that is all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sir. I thank you very, very much.
You bet.
Mr. Bond, do you have anything this evening for council around the table, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight a couple things at the Nicholas Museum. Some of you may be aware that there is currently a show featuring indigenous culture, the work of indigenous artists called Grounded. That exhibit is going, I believe, through the middle of March. And in conjunction with that, there is this Thursday evening at 6 p.m., Thursday, March 2nd, there is a performance of the Wind River dancers that will be featured. So if you've never seen the dancers before, a rare treat here in Casper. So just want to highlight those things.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Kathy? Nothing tonight? Randy?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Amber? Nothing? Mr. Gamroth?
Thanks, Bruce. I got a couple things. There was an OID, Old Yellowstone District meeting yesterday. I want to thank Jenna for showing up in person. I attended that remotely as well. We spoke about Midwest reconstruction going on. Sounds like it's looking like the bid is going out in May likely, so construction will be this summer along that stretch of Midwest, starting on the Poplar side. And that may bleed into next year just because it's a larger project. And it sounds like Poplar is going to go on at the same time, starting at First and Poplar, working towards Collins. So that area of town is going to be pretty messed up, sounds like, this year. So just something we're going to have to live with. It's going to be painful, but folks will just have to get used to taking different routes if you drive through that area often, which I do. So looking forward to that. We also talked about some of the events and programming in the district, including historic preservation. They're doing a plaque project where they're putting up plaques around historic sites downtown, Nolan Feed, Yellowstone Garage. There was 6 of them, I think, so there'll be plaques with QR codes. You can hover your phone above it and learn more about the history of those sites, so that's really cool. Jeffree Star is aiming to open his retail shop here in April. It sounds like there wasn't a specific date given, but here in the next couple months, it sounds like that'll be open. Still working on the outside, but hoping to have the inside ready to start use in April. And then lastly, the Casper Youth Council has launched its youth assessment. And so they have some flyers that they'll be giving out. I can forward that to everyone else on council to disseminate as you please. But they're looking to collect data, analyze that data, and follow up with student forums in April and May. And they'll create an annual report to present to us. And so I guess be looking forward to that here in the next couple months, learning a little bit more about the youth in our town and maybe ways we can engage them and activate them in our community. If you have any questions, you can reach out to her. We'll have a Casper Youth Council meeting this Sunday, and I believe we're being joined by our new city attorney and the city manager. That's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Lisa?
We had the state wrestling tournament this last weekend, and just a huge shout out to Kelly Walsh Sr., Olivia Smith for taking first place in her championship from wrestling. Big deal.
It is a big deal.
Huh?
Did you go to this Casper meeting today?
I did not.
Anything else, Lisa?
No, that's it.
Okay, Jenna?
Maybe you have an update. Well, went to the OYD thing like Kyle mentioned, so won't repeat that. And then over the weekend, I went over to Cheyenne and went and attended the Governor's Arts Award. That was fun. There was a lot of people from Casper there, and it was nice to be around and network with all the other artists and theater people. But Art 321 was there, and the Nick was there, and so we all had a good time. But it was nice, again, just to meet everybody from different areas and just connect with.
Where'd they do that at?
Cheyenne at Little America. So, it was a good time.
Very nice. Anything else? That's it. Vice Mayor?
I had my first Natrona County Recreation Joint Powers Board meeting on Friday.
Nice.
So it was good. They just elected officers. I didn't until I got my feet on the ground. I chose not to chair it or be a secretary or treasurer or any of it for right now. So I kind of figure out what's going on. But that's all we did. That meeting, I will give you updates as things come in. It seems to be like it's going to be a really fun opportunity to help out in the community, be able to do that and help with granting out funding to things in the county. So looking forward to that. So I'll keep you guys up to date on that. The only other thing I have is I have a city homeless initiatives meeting tomorrow. I think Kyle will be there as well for that one. So I'm looking forward to that meeting and any updates we got for that. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, just piggybacking on you, I would ask that a lot of us are on a lot of committees, a lot of councils, a lot of things. So please keep the council in the know with your updates during council around the table every week so that everybody kind of knows what's going on. That's why we have liaisons to kind of come back and let council know where we're at. So there's a lot of things going on that everybody might not be privy to, and it's always good if we can update them better. Last Friday night, I went to the Police Department Awards. It was amazing. That was at the McGinley Center, which is quite incredible if you haven't been in there. And we had a lot of officer awards being handed out. It was done very well. I was the only counselor there. We didn't have anybody else, and it was noted, unfortunately. So if you get an opportunity when we have especially city things going on and you can make it, those are paid attention to and very much appreciated by our staff. So I understand we're all busy. I get it. I'm just saying if you ever have an opportunity to help partake in those, it does go a long way for the morale for the people that work for us. I attended the state wrestling championships this weekend. They had 9 mats going, and that was on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday they had the USA wrestling stuff. So, I mean, it was just jam-packed with wrestlers, and they were very smart. WHSAA decided not to close it in the midst of that big storm that we got, and thank God for our street crew because they did an amazing job. And even the people from out of town were raving about the shape of our roads considering how much snow we got. So shout out to our city workers because I know they've worked straight through for weeks now. And they did a wonderful job. And this is the first ever year that we had girls state wrestling. So we crowned every weight from 106 all the way to 285. And they are the first time ever girls state wrestling champions. I will tell you, I didn't see one girls wrestling match, But I saw most of the boys, and my buddy's kid won his third year in a row. So those are just a lot of fun. This weekend will be the 1A, 2A state basketball championships at Casper College and the Event Center. And then the following weekend will be 3A, 4A at Casper College and at the Event Center. So if you're looking for something to do and you want to see some really good quality high school basketball, the next couple weekends we'll have that for you. So, which led me to Dave from Wham treated us to a Cowboy basketball game last night. The first one I'd been to in 25 years. And they upset Nevada and beat them, and that was incredible. That arena's amazing, man. It was, the governor was there. It was that was a really good time. I'm gonna have to make a few more of those. Yeah, we had a really good time. That's all I have. How about that? Oh, SLID meetings I already went over. That was a very unique thing to be involved in, and I appreciate it. I know Amber drove all the way down there yesterday, down and back, doing some sponsoring for Casper Pride. So that poor busy girl, like she's got any extra time. But man, I'm telling you, they're going to be done on Friday. But it's that's a very unique opportunity. If you ever get a chance to go, it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that. I got to hang out with Carter and Andrew for a couple days. I'm sure they're shell shocked and beaten down by it all, but they'll be all right. They learned what Spider Monkey is. They know who Baby Doll is now. Life is good.
It's amazing.
Life is good. So, just to give you some background, my wife always calls me Baby Doll, and I called her, and it came through my truck. She's like, "Hello, Baby Doll," and these two just thought that was hilarious. So I just thought I'd tell on myself, so you have no power now. Anyway, that's all I have. We will convene next week for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. We'll see you at 5:30 for our pre-meeting, and
That's it.
I guess that's it. Have a great evening. Ray.
Thanks.
See what time it is, bro? Thank you.